All right, good morning. Welcome in. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Kinetic Staffing. Kinetic Staffing. Add more talent to your roster. KineticStaffing.com. And we talk about talent, recruiting all the time. Get the right people on the field with Kinetic Staffing. Find your talent you need to achieve excellence. Legal and professional contract and career positions. Alan Lang and the team, KineticStaffing.com. That's KINETIC. I think most of you know that, but KineticStaffing.com. Let them be your talent scout for your firm or company. KineticStaffing.com. Alan Lang and the team will take care of you. ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app, and you can watch the show right now on Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show. Facebook, search the Out of Bounds Show. We welcome in Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. He joins us, genespage.com. He joins us on the Bucked Up Energy Drinks guest line. Steve, what was it like once you finally received the shipment of your new book, Dogpile, on the 2021 MSU Baseball National Championship last week?
Well, it's almost like having a baby. It's like, you're so expectant of something great to happen. And then, down the stretch, you're just hoping nothing goes wrong. And we had some things go wrong, got some delays from the printer, but finally got them in hand. And it was kind of a surreal moment. I finished writing this book back in August, and it usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get a book printed. It took about 5 months. And so it's the supply chain issues that we're all dealing with. But until it happens to you, you don't think it's real. But now it's been on the market now for a couple of days, and I believe they'll be getting some stock at Lemuria today. And I'll be down there this Saturday from 12 to 2, and then I'll be at Persnickety in Madison later that day, I think from 3 to 5. And so it's been very well received, and a lot of long lines at the book signings so far.
Well, congratulations. What's the website again?
It's dogpilethebook.com. That's
Okay.
DAWG, pilethebook.com.
How many did you sign since you got them Thursday or Friday?
Well, I spent the last couple of days in Madison. Matter of fact, I went and ate at your little stop in the road down there in Livingston last night and had a tremendous meal.
But, great.
Spent all day yesterday signing books. And I guess I signed about 3,500, I guess, yesterday. And they've already ordered a second printing. Usually what happens is like the first printing comes in, you go back and kind of re-edit, and there's always people that'll say, hey, you screwed this up, dude. You got to fix it. And so we're not going to have time to do that. With these supply chain issues, even the second printing will be basically the first printing. I think that's all they'll change is first printing, second printing, because they're trying to pump these books out as quickly as they can, because we expect to sell this book, probably kind of evergreen, but we know this year, even from now all the way up to Christmas, the demand for it's going to be tremendous.
Your favorite interview in the book?
Got to be Ron Polk. It's interesting too, and that's actually chapter 2 in the book. And if I can back up a second, one of the things that was important to me in chapter 1 is called The Boys from the South. Because, basically back in those days, everybody kind of recruited their own neighborhoods. That's what you did. You recruited, your same geographic area. Well, when Polk got here, Polk was among the first national recruiters in college baseball. And I didn't know this. He was the first full-time baseball coach in Southeastern Conference history. Everybody else had something else to do. And it's amazing how Polk's brain works. He just starts rattling off, this guy worked at this school, and he had to handle the buses and the transportation, and this guy ran the equipment room, and this guy sold insurance on the side because Kentucky wasn't paying him enough. And the thing that I learned kind of talking to Polk and interviewing Cohen a little bit too is just Mississippi State has been an innovative school when it's come to college baseball, for over 100 years. One of the first schools to have lights and night games, and thanks to Dutch McCool and Paul Gregory and those guys. It's like it revolutionized the sport in many respects because people love coming to the ball games, but, college baseball games were played in the afternoon back then because you didn't have lights. And so all of a sudden, Dutch McCool makes this big donation to Mississippi State to put lights up. And now all of a sudden, college baseball in Starkville became an event. So people would get off work every day and run out there to the beer garden and throw back a cold one and watch the Diamond Dogs play. And that's really the precursor to what we have today. And not just at Mississippi State, but in the Southeastern Conference.
Wow, that is interesting. Okay. How much are these interviews, are they dedicated chapters? Like, is Ron Polk a whole how does that work?
So the first chapter is basically the history of Mississippi State baseball up to the hiring of Ron Polk. And then Chapter 2 is Ron Polk brings you up to the hiring of John Cohen. And then, of course, John Cohen takes you through his time as a player and a coach and now as an AD and hiring Chris Lemonis. And then you've got Chris talking about his hiring, taking the job, that whole process. And, like, one of the cool things, and I don't know that the book really does it justice, he says that when the first time he got here, and I believe it was Bo Hemphill that drove them around and brought the family at a Duty Noble Field, and Chris said one of his daughters just looked at him and said, "Dad, it's kind of like, can you believe this place, And Chris just said, I know, baby, I know. And it's like you get chills thinking about seeing all that. And I wrote about that, but it's like to hear Chris explain it, it's like you begin to kind of realize, kind of what you've got your arms around here, with Duty Noble Field and Mississippi State. And then Chris kind of sets it up and he goes, even back in the fall, I thought we had an Omaha team. I thought we had a team capable of doing some amazing things. And then that gets you into the season. And so there's a dedicated chapter for every week of the season all the way through the national championship.
Okay. All right. Steve Robertson talking about his new book, Dogpile. And he'll be at Lemuria. What day, Steve?
Saturday, 12 to 2. And then for Snickety, 3 to 5, I think.
Okay. All right. So Saturday, 12 to 2, 3 to 5 per Snickety. So when you talked to Lemonis, did you ever ask him like how much time it took him to say yes to Cohen? I mean, like, was it 2 seconds? What did you get any of that?
Yeah, we did talk. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was kind of trending in that direction, and that was one of the things John talked about. It's like, and then of course they're real protective of other candidates. I mean, it's like, and John even tells you that, like, towards the end, as we had kind of focused in on Chris and thinking, Chris is our guy, some of the guys in the beginning that we really targeted kind of came back around. We're like, hey, let's talk about this again. But at that point, we were kind of locked in on our guy. And in hindsight, that's proven to be the right decision because,
Sure.
We've had some great coaches here at Mississippi State. We've only had one win a national championship, and that's Chris Lemonis.
Did you interview Raffy?
I did. I interviewed Raffy actually after I interviewed Raffy when we got home from Omaha, and then called him back again. I got some more quotes for the book, and that's the thing too. Like, I say this, with as much respect as I can, but it's like when I think about many of our former players, and there are so many of them that you'll find out in left field lounge, during big weekends and that kind of stuff. But the way that Raffy has come back and really embraced the Mississippi State family the past few years, I mean, it's remarkable to see, one of our most beloved, Diamond Dogs out there at the team hotel helping people he doesn't know offload their luggage to go check in to go to Omaha. I mean, it's like, who does that? I mean, this is Rafael Palmeiro, a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame, a guy that's got his name on buildings on this campus, and he's out there taking every picture, shaking every hand, and basically is one of the fans. I mean, it's like, and I love the fact that they showed him and Dak, of course, on the broadcast, and there's Rafi, and we talked about, and this is in the book too, what it felt like to finally hold that trophy. When that '84 team probably should have won it, and Polk says that's one of the things too. I asked Polk about which of the teams that didn't win it probably should have, because we all think '85, '89. Polk says the '84 team.
Oh, they lost to UNO, gut-wrenching in the regional. Good grief, right?
Yeah. And so what's crazy about all that stuff
We
is
die.
like you go through, well, and what's interesting about, Polk's vantage point is different than ours. It's like, we see the end result, but he sees these guys every day and, in practice and stuff. And And I just think, what Rafi's done, and we talked about it was always his goal to win a national championship. And, when Miami was recruiting him, they were the defending national champions, but Ron Polk beat them to get him here, and he never got to hold that trophy. And that's one of the most endearing images of Omaha is there's Rafael Palmeiro at the team hotel hoisting that trophy skyward to our fans. It's just an amazing moment.
Steve Robertson, the book is now out, Dogpile, on the 2021 Mississippi State National Championship over Vanderbilt. Steve joins us on the Bucked Up Energy Drinks guest line. You're listening Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. So you did a chapter with Cohen? Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think you have to. I mean, it's like.
Well, he modernized the program at a time where it needed to happen. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's the truth.
Well, and along those lines, too, when Cohen got here, we didn't have a single verbal commitment for the next recruiting class. And Dan McDonnell and Mike Bianco had, I think, 14 of the top 15 players from Mississippi, or at least 9 of the top 10. The only guy they didn't have was Chris Stratton. John Cohen comes in and gets Chris Stratton, who becomes the centerpiece of the rotation, and still pitching in the major leagues today. But, it's incredible to think, and I give Dan McDonnell a lot of credit, and I think in many respects, I think most people that love Ole Miss baseball would tell you this too, that Dan McDonnell not only modernized baseball at Ole Miss, I think he forced Mississippi State to modernize.
I think that's a great point.
You had to get out there and compete because, and I'm not being critical of anybody because I love everybody that's involved, but, State's recruiting efforts have gotten a little antiquated. We've gotten a little big for our britches. It's like, hey, well, these kids will come to camp. They all want to come to Mississippi State. Well, Bianco and McDonnell are out there saying, hey, we don't need you to come to camp. We love you. We'll take you right now.
Right.
And so so what happens, those kids never showed up on the Mississippi State campus for a camp. And I think when John got here, he kind of fought fire with fire. And John's a competitor, as you know, and I think that he saw Dan McDonnell as a guy that was a real threat to Mississippi State baseball. And so he went out there and went head-to-head with him on many kids and got a lot of them. But, Ole Miss obviously got a lot too. And so I think when you really look at kind of the trajectory of both programs, it really changed with that, with McDonnell coming in and kind of leading the recruiting efforts and, Cohen coming to Mississippi State and kind of bringing this dinosaur into a modern era.
How about the fact that Lamonis is tied to McDonnell? And
I've actually talked to Dan about that when we were in Omaha, and Dan and his wife came, and I joked with him a little bit. That he wasn't wearing the Mississippi State logo. He had a maroon shirt on, but his pride would only let him go so far, and joke with him a little bit about that. But I'll tell you, the guy is so incredibly engaging. And we talked about he and Chris, and I said, Chris has told me before that he's never going to schedule you guys no matter where you go. And he goes, no, we will never do that. He said, we will never schedule a series or a game together. If we ever play, it's going to be in the postseason. We're never going to agree to do that because they're just too good of friends. And, you've heard that, maybe from Lamona's side, but to hear it from Dan McDonnell's side, and he was very genuine in what he said. He said, we're just too good of friends and too fierce of competitors that we're just not going to do it.
I mean, Dan McDonnell's already been to 5 College World Series. That is incredible. God. The guy. So he was very engaging, and you could see his relatability factor and magnetic when you were visiting with him. I saw him, but I didn't visit with him out at the CWS.
Well, you can definitely tell why he's such a great recruiter.
Okay.
He's very authentic in what he says, and I'm sitting there, and it's me and him and Chris Burke and John Cohen. And so I didn't say much, because I'm like, anything that I can say adds nothing to this conversation. So I'm just going to sit back and listen to these guys talk shop a little bit. And it's one of my favorite memories of Omaha. It's just hearing those guys talk college baseball and talk about memories and about players and talk about Chris Lamonis and just talk about where Mississippi State's place is. And I'll tell you, there was nobody in Omaha, Nebraska that wasn't wearing an Anchor Down shirt that wasn't rooting for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
Because it's like this rightful passage. It's like, and even some guys, and I won't quote those guys, but I had so many people that were there, dignitaries of college baseball that were like, this needs to happen. Not just for Mississippi State, but for the sport of college baseball, because Mississippi State has committed so much resources to college baseball, you need to see it pay off for them, but also, too, to show other schools to think, hey, you know what, if we invest in this, we could get the great reward. And so it's great for Mississippi State, but it's also a great thing for college baseball.
Okay, so who did you get? Tanner Allen? I mean, who else? Give us some other names.
Yeah, I got everybody. I mean, it's like, you know, and I kept every interview I did the entire season. And it's so interesting, you know, like I'm signing books yesterday, and it's like Stone Simmons' family has bought a book, you know. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I quoted him in the Vanderbilt chapter. And then I get the next book comes along, is it Scotty DeBrole's family? It's like, oh, yeah, I quoted him in this chapter and that chapter. And so one of my goals, everybody possible. You know, I didn't get everybody, but, you know, I got, you know, even got Braylon Skinner and even got Drew McGowan and some other guys like that, because it's so important. I wanted everybody to feel a part of this. And while, you know, TA and Rowdy and Bednar, the headliners, everybody contributed. And I think that's really the, you know, probably the big maroon thread in all of this is that while you had a couple of superstars, you didn't have anybody that didn't make a positive contribution. And wanted all of those families and those players to be represented. And as I mentioned in that very first chapter, yeah, I've got mention for every All-American and every big leaguer in the history of the Mississippi State baseball program. And it was important to me to have that in chapter 1, because it is important to remember, number one, Mississippi State has always been great at baseball, but those people laid the groundwork for what we enjoy today. And I wanted them to be mentioned. I wanted their families to feel honored to be in call. This is about the 2021 college baseball national championship. That doesn't happen without their family members. That doesn't happen without those guys. And one the interesting thing I'll bring up for you too is, if I remember correctly, I think it was 1919. Mississippi State had 3 weekend pitchers that went to the big leagues in 1919, and it wasn't even a great year at Mississippi State. And it's like you go back and you look at all this stuff, and you do this research, and you find these obscure players that you've never heard of that had these all-conference type careers, and it's like, well, why have I never heard about this guy? And that's one of the things that I hope in the balance of my career that I can do is to really kind of shine a light on some of those great maroon and white stars in college baseball that, you know, maybe perhaps that my generation's forgotten about.
Did you have an opportunity? I think you did. Jeff Brantley in the book?
No, I spoke to Jeff before he came, but I didn't get Jeff in the book. And it was like, we had to make some difficult decisions because, you know, it's the longest book I've ever written, and they gave me a budget. Okay, we want to do 75,000 words, and I think I ended up doing 92,000. You know, and so.
Oh wow! Okay, I see.
I didn't want to cut, and it's like there's so many guys you want to talk to. You know, so I got a couple quotes in there from Will from the celebration, and you know, you can't have a championship book, I don't think, without mentioning Will and Rafi. And
no,
I was very fortunate to have some quotes from them in there, and but it's just insane to think about. You know, Rafi's in Omaha, and then Will comes to the celebration. And, you know, you'd like to have the whole family together at all times, but at least that great generation of baseball players, you know, were represented at both of those historic events. And the thing that I go back to is in Omaha, how many players that I saw, and Polk and I talked about this. I mean, it's dozens and dozens of former players that are there with their kids.
Oh, it was unbelievable.
And their kids are wearing their jerseys.
Yeah.
Like their kids are wearing their dad's jersey as they're walking around. And it's like, this has to happen. I mean, it's like, this is like, you know, kind of the matrimonial rite of passage here for Mississippi State, where all these previous generations are there. And what's crazy is when we had the celebration at Duty Noble Field, I interviewed the first bat boy at Mississippi State. I mean, what are the chances of that? I walk out there and just say, hey, going to give me a couple comments? And he's the first bat boy at Mississippi State. I mean, he can barely stand. And there he is out there celebrating a national championship. I mean, this is something that's been, you know, generations in the making, and it's something that we'll all never forget.
Steve Robertson's new book, Dogpile, is out. He'll be at Lemuria on Saturday and Persnickety. What show, did anybody get emotional when you talked to him?
Yeah. I mean, and what's, you know, it's one of those things too. It's like there's this different, you know, levels of emotion, you know, and, you know, John got emotional a couple of times about, you know, in a couple different respects. And one of the things that I did not really plan to bring up, but he brought it up, was about when he was hired. and there was this perception that Polk didn't want John to get the job. And, you know, he was pushing Tommy Raffo as his successor. Tommy,
Sure.
of course, is on the staff. But, and John talks about how all that happened and what it meant to him and how important it was to kind of get those things reconciled, and how that he wishes there were some things that maybe he would have handled differently. But, yeah, that was really kind of an ugly time, you know, in Mississippi State baseball history. And John, to my knowledge, had never spoken about that on the record before. And again, I think he wanted to address that because I think, okay, we've won a national championship. John's been the coach that won an SEC championship and modernized Mississippi State baseball. And then the guy he's hired has won a national championship. So maybe now's the time to address that. And so I thought it was really kind of beautiful. And John was so open about that it really surprised me. I mean,
I think that's needed. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I didn't know that till you just told me. Because I thought John got thrown under the bus in the whole thing. And I could say that on the air back then, but John couldn't. And nobody else wanted to touch it. And he had a massive rebuild, and he couldn't say that either because of the respect that he had for Coach Polk. But you just mentioned they didn't even have a commitment, you know, in the class. So that's fat. I mean, with all the different, nuggets and interviews that you did in Dogpile, to me, that may be one of the, most interesting and fascinating pieces of the book. Cohen weighing in. I mean, look, it took huge stones for Greg Byrne as a brand new AD to go against Ron Polk and hire Cohen. Steve?
Oh, I know. And this is the thing, too. It's like, Gene's page, we used to have Rafael Palmeiro come out there and post and how he felt like the Coach Polk should still get the opportunity to name his successor. And, it's like, and so it kind of split the family, a little bit apart. You had Polk guys, you had Byrne guys, you had Cohen guys, and now we just got Mississippi State guys and gals.
That's true.
It's like, we've overcome all that. But that was a really kind of a dark chapter in the program, and that could have been the fracture that really changed the trajectory of Mississippi State baseball. But I think you give John Cohen a lot of credit. He didn't let that happen. Yeah. And John came in here, I think in some ways it may have even motivated him to prove himself even more. And then next thing you know, we win an SEC championship, the first one since '89. And so, I think there are a lot of people that really their love for Mississippi State baseball kind of paved the path to reconciliation.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it up. The book, The Dogpile, is out. And Steve Robertson, the author, this will outsell anything he's done, maybe by 100 miles. But he'll be at Lemuria 12 to 2. Saturday and Persnickety 3 to 5. And we're going to book him here in about 55 minutes at the Y'all Lifestyle Shop or at the studio. So, Steve, thanks. We appreciate the time. Steve joined us on the Bucked Up Energy Drinks guest line. Thanks for listening to the show today. Our podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podbean, and you can search the Out of Bounds show with Bo Bounds. If you missed Tom Luganville on Auburn and several other things, and Steve Robertson on his new book, The Dogpile. We'll have Mike Detillier tomorrow at 8:30 on the Out of Bounds show. Have a great day. See you.